Hey, Valky, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Hi, Alex. I'm glad you have me.
Yeah, for sure. And to get started, can we learn a little bit about your journey in user research?
Sure. So I started out in engineering. I have a very eclectic background. Started out in mechanical engineering and was doing graduate work, and that's where I learned about all this thing about like human factors and how like we should understand how the human plays a role when designing things from like cars to remote controls, etc. And that's like how I started to get interested in this field, human computer interaction. That's when like that started being a thing taught at schools, at least in the engineering programs. And I worked at my first job out of grad school was in a company that did voice user interfaces. So this is way, way before Siri or Alexa or any of the assistants. I tried to pronounce their names really softly so they don't respond while I'm on a meeting. But yeah, it was very guided conversations. And that's how like you imagine like how UX and research was really important because like the machines couldn't really understand natural language. So you had to like prompt, in this case, prompt the human to respond in a way that the machine can understand with it a specific set of vocabulary. So it was like a really interesting point of view because I understood from the engineering perspective why it failed, but I really wanted to understand from the human perspective why the humans were not reacting to what the machine was prompting them to do. And it's a mix of like some people didn't understand they're talking to a computer, or some people like look at like science fiction movies and where the computers really understand anything that they say in iterance. And like right now like machines are really good at understanding humans, but that's like where like got me my bug of like how can like I help the engineers understand why the humans are not using the machines in the way that they want them to do. So I started to do veered from engineering and did a PhD in cognitive psychology to understand how humans process and like our limitations and our expectations. And that just gave me like a really good understanding of like why, engineerings were not able to provide an interface that helped like how humans were expecting, right? So that's how I started my journey in there. I went into the academia world for a while, and then I worked as a researcher in agencies and also in-house. And now I am leading a research team at Amazon.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that background. I think one of the questions I have is, and I think Amazon probably already has a good culture of research, but for those who don't, I mean, unfortunately, still today in 2025, research is all too often an afterthought. You get product teams that are like, "Oh, I know the user, we're good," you know? So how do you really like build a culture and show the value of research to where teams are like, wait, we didn't do research or we need to do more research?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll tell you like how I started because I'm like when I started before coming to Amazon, or I was before I was at Google also, I actually like built UX teams. So it was in organizations or companies that considered like this is a user interface and our engineers are capable of designing that. So like how can we help you understand that actually bringing design or research is something that will actually help your engineers in producing a product that will be used by your customers, right? So the way that I've been able to successfully do that is by partnering with engineering and helping them understand that the products that they build are great and they're very smart, but the users don't necessarily think the same way that they think, right? Like
Yeah.
they expect have different expectations from and that they do. And so like by bringing them as partners, they can see the value of like this research team or this UX team is helping me provide a perspective of how users interact with our products. And once like you show them that, they're like super bought in and like act as your partners and value, the work that you do because you're trying at the end to make not just engineers but like the business successful, right? By producing a product that your customers are going to love using, right? And can continue to use. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. And tell me about your teams and how you mentor and grow teams. A lot of designers I talk to are interested in research. A lot of product teams are doing research, and I don't know if it's the right kind of research. So everyone's kind of doing their own version of research, but how do you decide, okay, this person's actually going to be a great dedicated researcher versus like, okay, let the product team do research, but we need some more
Yeah.
rigorous research?
So, there's different types of resources and culture and research culture that different companies have or that they have the budget to have, right? So like if you imagine like if you're in a small organization, right? Like you can't have like a full UX team. You can have a designer, a researcher, a writer, front end UXer. Like you may have just one person, right? And then that person is going to be able to have to wear multiple hats, right? But then you may have like a big team, like even like, I've had big teams, right? But the ratio of researchers to product managers or engineers or even designers, it's not, 1 to 1, right? It's never going to be
Yeah.
like that. And at the end, like all of us are trying to build a product for our users. And we want our stakeholders to know that user voice, right? So we don't want to be like the wall between users. Like we actually want product managers, designers to talk to users and to hear them, right? Not just through us. We help elevate that voice, but we also want to encourage them to do that, right? But there comes like the caveat of that is like the way that like you approach as a researcher objectively to try to answer a question may not necessarily be the way that somebody who's building the product, right? Like they may want to be like, hey, may listen to different things or may not know how to probe, right? So one of the things that I've established within my teams is like, hey, we want to like embolden our stakeholders to hear from our users, but we want to do it in a methodical way by raising the bar of how they approach that. So we've created different like templates like, hey, here's like what a discussion guide would look like, and trainings like this is how you should respond if that person is not giving you feedback, or maybe they're not, you know be silent, let them talk to you, right? Listen to those things that the user is not saying, how to probe. If you want to see how like, I don't know, how they react to a product, like don't tell them like click on the button. You're like, where would you click? We try to support them in a way to so they can gather objective findings and help them understand that by them finding where the gap is, where the flow breaks, that's like helpful for them, right? It's not going to help them show why the product or the idea is not successful, but actually will make them refine their product to make it more successful.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think one of the themes I've heard over the past 2 or 3 years is like, okay, there's no time for PhD level research, and the pace of product teams is insane these days. And so, how do you find that balance between doing thorough enough research or doing that quick iterative just enough research? Like, how do you find that middle ground?
Yeah. So what is key is to like consider that like a research team can scale through their partners, right? So what I said, like, my team, I rather focus my team on doing strategic foundational work that has long-term impact, 6 months, even a year ahead, and then do that iterative tactical work by scaling through our partners, right? So I'm like, hey, you want to test that button? Here, let me help you go ahead and test it yourself. I want to have my researcher figuring out like the whole workflow and how we can help with that workflow. Or maybe like that's a question that my team can do. They're already doing a study in this area. They can add 5, 10 more minutes and answer your question. So like for those small technical things, that's where like we can scale because the teams need to move fast, right? And we don't want to be the bottleneck for them. But at the
Yes.
end, like we see the highest value of research when we're like way ahead at the strategy level, right? And our partners are able to understand that. And now that's how that we work with them. Like, hey, bring us early. We can help you for the day-to-day tactical stuff. We can help you scale as well.
Yeah, so you're doing both essentially. Like you still have your eye on the prize with long-term deep research, but are scaling across teams to quickly iterate. That's really smart. Let's talk about AI. Like it's everywhere. How do you find that balance between using AI when appropriate versus okay, this is not time for AI. This is time for real users and real work.
Yeah. So I'm actually think it's like we're like a very exciting time because I think AI can like, the way that that I've had my research team scale through our partners is like we can like force multiply our work through AI, right? So AI can help us, start brainstorming what are the research questions we have, or how should we approach in answering, the question that the product team brings for us, or the problem that the product team brings. We can use AI to like synthesize what other research has been done in there, right? So we can like use that to move a lot faster in that way.
Yeah.
And even like for analysis, right? We can like use AI to look at patterns or summarize large quant or qual data, right? The way that like I like to bring my researchers in is like we always need to be what's like the human in that loop of AI. Like the AI is always going to produce an answer for you. But like what the human part brings there is like, is this answer established in the right context or the right method or the right background or social implications that the AI may not know, right? Or may not have that full picture. So like that's how like the researcher will be successful is by incorporating that human aspect and like almost like let's check that the AI is producing. They're always going to, there's always like you're going to create like synthetic data. It's always going to give you an answer, but how can you confirm that that answer is giving you the right signal is through that research context and higher level thinking that they can bring in. Mhm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What advice would you have for people looking to either make the transition to user research or they're coming out of school? What advice would you give them?
I think it's just being very curious and inquisitive, like, explore like any design, right? So from like how to open a door or how to call an elevator, like try to think like what was that designer or engineer thinking when they did that, right? And then be very like a good listener and observer, try to see how others are using it because like the way that you use it might even be very different that like the way somebody else might approach it. And think about like who are all your customers and think are there different groups that may be using this product differently, so try to be very curious. I think like that will give you like an open mind to start understanding how people approach the products or the designs that exist there. I think that's just like the key. Like whenever I'm trying to hire somebody, I want to understand like how curious they are, how they're able to build empathy for the customer, and then how can they later like be able to provide like that narrative to be an advocate for those users.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's great advice. Well, thanks so much for joining the show and sharing your insights today.
Thank you, Alex. This was really interesting conversation.